And I'm so happy that Galit started with the Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know why? Because I think, when we look at the current situation in Egypt, it's really, well, I'm tempted, first of all, to give you a soundbite. In my age, the television age, it was KISS. Keep it short, stupid. In her age, the age of the internet and the icons, it's Miss. Make it short, stupid. In other words, actually, really, why is this whole thing, coming up? Because people have shorter attention spans, and everything is click, delete, not Galit, delete. Click, delete, and so the attention span is shorter. Icon is an economical way to understand by pictures, because the most important thing, and that's what I teach, is making pictures in people's mind. For example, when I say, what is Shaare Zedek? That's another organization. But when I show you a picture of January 2010 in Haiti, then you know that's Shaare Zedek, a field hospital in less than 24 hours to save the people of Haiti. You have a picture, that's Shaare Zedek. That's an icon. The only problem, when we deal with the current situation, coming back to the Egyptian analogy, is that I think, it's my humble opinion, that perhaps today Galit and those people who were involved in trying to interpret and understand Egyptian hieroglyphic in the past understand more about those hieroglyphic than about the present-day Egyptian icons. And really, when you think about icons, it's sort of, short way or a very economic way to put pictures in your mind. And what are the pictures that we have from Egypt today, by all means? Oh, I open television every morning at 5 o'clock before I go to exercise, and here is Cooper Anderson, 360 degrees, CNN, the guy who's going to bring democratic revolution to Egypt. Okay, I came from an alien planet. I don't know anything. I opened CNN. And what happened with this guy in the last 24 hours? He was roughed up. Oh, he encountered an opposition, but he stood boldly for the sake of democracy in Egypt. And he is going to bring democracy in Egypt. That's the modern day icon of CNN. What is the revolution in Egypt? What's happening in Egypt? The crisis in Egypt? Oh, it's about democracy. And Cooper Anderson is the best narrative to explain that. He's part of the story, or maybe a major element in the story. And what about 80 million Egyptians who have no food to eat? 40% of them illiterate, 50% of them below the age of 24, shouting, clamoring for a government to give them jobs after they graduated from university, hoping that the only job they can get is be a garçon in the Hyatt Hotel, because that's a paying salary. They can't work, not as economists, not as... This is the real thing. To paraphrase a movie that I've seen recently, it's not about corruption so much, and it's not about trying to get democracy working in Egypt. It's about hunger. It's about the ability of governments in the Middle East, and particularly in Egypt, to deal with hunger. This is the icon that we don't read. The icon we read is Cooper Anderson bringing democratic revolution to Egypt. It's ridiculous, but that's how he looked at television. And they're discussing, will there be opposition? Will they rough me up again? Will the Egyptian people, which I lead, will be able to win this revolution? And the real problem of Egypt, democracy, theocracy, totalitarian regime, is really anyone who sits there in the seat of power. It can be Mubarak, it can be Sadat, benevolent, or a tyrant, or a democratic regime, is how to feed 80 million people when all you can get is feeding maybe 50 million people. Now, Egypt is the largest Arab country in the Arab world. 1/4 of every Arab Muslim lives in Egypt. And it's a rich country. But it can't sustain itself. It can't because of changing global conditions, of perhaps ineffective way of distributing the wealth of the country. They have oil, they have gas, they have tourism in the Sinai, they got all of Sinai, And yet they fail. It's like a constant battle. Keep running to stay in one place. Egypt is like Alice in Wonderland, which meets the rabbit and she asks, how long do I have to run? Well, you have to keep running just to stay in one place. And if you stop running, like it happened in the last 10 days, you're going to fall back. And the real issue here is, will the Egyptian current leadership will be able to transfer power, which he has to because of the, you can't go back in history. Mubarak is finished, but can he actually transfer power to some sort of a transitional government supported by the military? And I say and I emphasize, in the Middle East, when you want democracy, if you want any hope that democracy will work, you have to put a non-democratic institution to protect it. That's what Ataturk did in Turkey originally, and he said it, he put it in the constitution. There's a threat to democracy and someone is about to usurp power and take control, the army imposes military rule for 6 months and calls for a new election. In Egypt, it's not in the constitution, but it's in the making because there's no other organization that can restore security to Egypt, restore back. And what do you mean restore? If this situation continues, Egypt will come to a screeching halt, which would mean that this 150,000-ton tanker sailing on the high seas of the Middle East will break up. And when it breaks up, the oil spill will affect the whole of the Middle East, including Israel. Not in the ways that we think, not because they'll put forces into the Sinai, because things will run out of control and there'll be more terrorist activity throughout the Middle East, more threats to Arab regimes, and the United States will stay there and wonder what happened, that all its allies are abandoning it. A sequel to the nightmare of 1979 when the Iranian regime of the Shah fell and something came, but this will be in a much greater scope with a much greater ripple effect than we had before. And that's all because, as Galit pointed out, we don't read the icons of Egypt today. It's not an arm with sinews. It's an arm that cannot raise the Egyptian people. No one can actually, unless there is support and help from outside countries. Now, what does it have to do with us? What does it have to do with the Israeli icon? With our story? It has a lot to do. Because you didn't need WikiLeaks to explain to you what is happening when you saw what is happening on the ground in Egypt and what happened with the rest of the Arab world. We are not the problem of the Middle East. The Arab-Israeli conflict is the least important conflict to be resolved. What, the Palestinians are starving? No, they get $4 billion a year. I mean, they're the richest refugee people in the world. Richest. Richest. The fact that they don't distribute it between themselves, that's another problem of how you distribute it. But in terms of resources, I think there are Egyptians who are dreaming at night that they will get at least what every Palestinian refugee gets. And for people of you who didn't visit Egypt and who think that Anderson Cooper tells you the story of Egypt, that's nonsense. In Cairo, there are 18 million people, twice and more than the number of people in all of Israel. In Cairo, there are people who live in graveyards. There are people in the dead city, and there are people who live in Animal City. You know what Animal City? They call it Animal City. It's not worth for human beings to live there, only animals, but people live there. Hundreds of thousands of people. And when I read, I see Anderson Cooper say, I was roughed up, and who knows how this revolution, and there's going to be a blood clash, and I'm trying to report about this democracy. It's like a prom hangover. After the prom, there's a hangover, and then you wake up to a reality which is the same or even worse than what was before. It's not that I have anything against the quest for democracy of these people, but the major problem Egypt is facing is not how to do a democratic reform. It's not how to shove democracy down the throat of the Egyptian regime. It's how to shove a little bit of food down their throat so that they can survive for a couple of more days. And that's what gets reported. That's the true icon of Egypt. Well, the leadership is at least, has the respect and has the honor not to tell all the story, and for other various reasons. But for anyone who travels in Egypt, a real reporter who goes down not only to the Nile area, but down to where the poor people live in Cairo and in Alexandria and all those places where they don't have anything to eat, you can understand what it is. This is not an icon, this is a true story. Anwar Sadat signed peace treaty. You know why he signed the peace treaty with Israel? He had first to go into the Sinai, fight Israel in 73, restore his honor. And then when he restored his honor, went to the Egyptian people and said, no more war, no more bloodshed. Why? Because I need to feed my people. He didn't say that, but that was the truth. So he went to the United States, got economic aid, got from Israel agricultural aid to teach people how to grow more. And you know why Sadat was so different than the other leaders? Maybe by Mubarak. Mubarak is commander of the Air Force. He saw everything from 30,000 feet. Sadat saw it from ground zero. He was a farmer, a falach. And he had to wake every morning, you know, when his father was trying to see, how am I going to feed 10 people when I can only feed 6 because my land will not give me the crops? And Sadat remembered that. So he called Israeli advisors. He called people to build experimental farms. And he said, teach us. He told Sharon, was then Minister of Agriculture. You know, he told his advisor, look at this man. 2 things you learn from him. He knows how to fight, and he knows how to grow in the desert. Learn from him. And that's what we were able to offer, quietly. But then Sadat was assassinated. Everything goes back to square one, and Egypt starts again, and again, the corruption and everything. But the basic thing that even without the corruption, it would still be very difficult for Egypt to sustain life and to provide life for these people. Because they've been, not just the Egyptian, but the other Arab countries, been very wasteful in treating the environment. And then one day they woke up in the morning and there was global warming.